All right, everybody, we're going to get started. Hello, and welcome to today's Hinckley Forum. My name is Max Lepore. The Hinckley Institute of Politics is a nonpartisan institute at the University of Utah. The Hinckley provides an array of transformative experiences for students through internships, forums, and classes. Hinckley Forums seek to foster public discourse and civil debate on the most current and pressing issues, bringing in local, national, and international thought leaders. Today's forum is titled Campaign for Uyghurs, and we are excited to be joined by prominent human rights activist Rushan Abbas, the founder and director of Campaign for Uyghurs. Rushan started her activism work while she was a student organizing and leading in the pro-democracy demonstrations at Xinjiang University in 1985 and 1988. Since her arrival in the United States in 1989, Ms. Abbas has been an ardent campaigner for the human rights of the Uyghur people. In 2017, Rushan Abbas founded the Campaign for Uyghurs to advocate and promote human rights and democratic freedoms for Uyghurs, and mobilize the international community to act to stop the human rights atrocity in East Turkestan. Under her organization, Ms. Abbas introduced and led the One Voice, One Step movement and successfully organized a demonstration on March 15, 2018 in 14 countries and 18 cities on the same day to protect China's detention of millions of Uyghurs in concentration camps. Ms. Abbas works with groups in the United States, Canada, the UK, and other parts of Europe, Australia, Japan, and Turkey to highlight the Uyghur cause and in support of empowering Uyghur women and youth for activism. In February 2022, Campaign for Uyghurs was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for activism and advocacy done to promote the Uyghur cause for freedom. Campaign for Uyghurs was nominated by U.S. House of Representatives members Tom Suozzi and Chris Smith, who co-chaired the Uyghur Caucus. Ms. Abbas frequently briefs U.S. lawmakers and officials on the human rights situation in East Turkestan, testifies at the United States Senate and Congress, and regularly appears on media outlets to advocate for the Uyghur cause and give public speeches, having spoken for audiences at Holocaust museums, universities, U.S. embassies, grassroots groups, and more. Please join me in welcoming our guest today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today and listen to the atrocity of the century, the Uyghur atrocity, Uyghur genocide. Just 5 years ago, I was a business professional, just doing my job and advocating at the site about the deteriorated human rights atrocities, human rights situation in East Turkestan, which is officially called Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. I never thought that today I will be going around the world trying to expose China's crimes and trying to educate people. And I never thought that I will be fighting for my own sister's freedom. My First Amendment right as an American citizen, my free speech came at a high cost. My sister was taken 6 days after my first public speech at the Hudson Institute. And this September 10th, we just marked 5 years anniversary of her detention. She's still in jail, a retired medical doctor. She's in jail because of me, because I spoke and I was exposing China's genocidal policies and outlining the fate of my in-laws, my husband's entire family, my parents-in-laws, 3 of my sister-in-laws, their husbands, brother-in-law and his wife, and 14 of his nieces and nephews all went missing. So when I talked about that, same day, exact 6 days after my speech, my aunt and my sister, 2 closest relatives that I have left back home, They were taken from two different cities, Urumqi and a town called Atush. It's 900 kilometers, 900 miles away from each other, 1,400 kilometers away from each other. So just tell you a little bit about who the Uyghurs are. We lived in Central Asia for thousands of years, and the place was very prominent center of commerce and the civilization for like 2,000 years ago. And you probably are familiar with the famous ancient Silk Road, and that starts from Kashgar. And the picture you see on the screen is one of the Uyghur kings from the Uyghur kingdom in 800, 900 BC to 1300. The Manchus invaded our homeland in 1876 as a part of great game between Great Britain and Russia. Russia was expanding all over Central Asia, and Great Britain was expanding the other parts of the world. So the Great Britain was afraid Russia will take our homeland, so they financed Manchu dynasty back then, and they invaded and they occupied. And our people fought and established two independent countries, one in 1933 and one in 1944. And the establishment of People's Republic of China in 1949, the Chinese Communist Party occupied our homeland. And that's the map you see. Let me see if I can point it out. It's 1/6 of entire China size-wise, 4 times of California, and connected to, actually we have borders with Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, all the stands, and Pakistan, and the south is Tibet, and the west is Mongolia. The place is landscaped between high mountains, desert, high mountains, desert, and high mountains. Like sandwiched between 3 high mountains and the 2 deserts, and you all know what's under desert. Petroleum, natural gas, all kind of natural resources. 1/3 of China's natural gas and oil reserves come from our homeland, 40% of coal reserve, and China produces, East Turkestan produces 84% of China's cotton output. And the tomatoes, and those cotton and tomatoes are handpicked by Uyghur slaves. Heinz ketchup, you are familiar with. And they use the tomatoes as production of the modern slavery. The Uyghur slaves pick those tomatoes by hands, working for free. We have some, I think I'm going to discuss a little more toward the end with companies' complicities, but Heinz ketchup is one of them. John Kerry's wife owns Heinz ketchup, and you see a lot of complicities from people like him because they want to continue to make profit out of Uyghur slaves' blood, sweat, and the tears. This is the current situation. If you have read or remember the movie 1984, that's nothing now. Just imagine that with cutting-edge technology and the nationalism and racism of the Chinese Communist Party. Uyghur women are facing forced sterilizations, forced abortions. About 1 million Uyghur children are abducted from their families. And the mass organ harvesting. End of 2016, all the Uyghur people were subject to mandatory DNA, the DNA check and the DNA collection and the health check. And we were wondering, what is this for? And we were worried that if China is trying to produce some sort of biological weapon against the Uyghurs. But then we started to see mass advertisement in Arabic to Arabic-speaking countries and halal organs. So the government has millions of Uyghurs in detention, and they have their blood type, DNA collection, DNA types, and also their health checks so they can match hearts, lungs, and the kidneys in like less than 2 weeks, if anybody needs those. Crematorias are being built next to the concentration camps as well as to the mostly Uyghurs located areas, for a culture that doesn't practice cremation. We are Muslim. We bury bodies. The one on the bottom, the red marks, that is quote from Chen Chuanguo's speeches, one of his statements that he delivered when he talks about that's Uyghurs, must first break their lineage, break their roots, and break their connections, and break their origins. So that actually just explains the mindset of the government. That's just a few pictures of the current, that's not a war zone. This is pictures from Urumqi, the capital city. And the one on the left corner, the picture on the left corner, is just a courtyard of the university like this. Imagine you have armed guards sitting and mingling every place that you are, monitoring you. The CCP sees religion and any kind of original thought as a threat. So basically, any aspect of the religion is being criminalized. Any normal practice of religion is being called as radicalization, and the Chinese government is making excuse of they are holding those Uyghur people in the camps to de-radicalize them. So if you just pray, go to mosque or go to church, you are a criminal. If you fast during Ramadan, you are a criminal. And just any kind of normal practice, including greetings like salam alaikum, which means peace be with you. If people use that to greet to each other, they are subject to the detention. When Cui Tianquai, the Chinese, former Chinese ambassador to the United States, when he was interviewed, and one of the CNN reporter asked him a question about those camps, why are you holding thousands of Uyghurs in detention? He said, oh, we are trying to make them normal people. We are trying to make those Uyghurs normal persons. If you Google on the CNN, you will see that exact interview and the article. So because of the language we speak, the religion that we believe, and the culture that we have, the ethnicity that we belong to, in the eyes of the Chinese Communist government, we are not even normal human beings. We are not even normal commodities. Some pictures of the outside of those camps. The Chinese government claims vocational training centers or re-education centers, but we call it concentration camps. If you look at it, it reminds you of those. Teach like school, be managed like the military, be defended like a prison. That's also a quote from Chen Chuanguo. Former detainees, they reported that everything that make them a person, like their family connections or whatever they believed, everything is being suspended and suppressed, and they are subject to indoctrination with pledging themselves to the CCP, to the Chinese Communist Party. And they're also subject to taking unknown medications, and the Uyghurs in the camps being used as guinea pigs. Intense political indoctrination, mental, physical torture, systematic mass rape. The former inmates actually testified in the most horrific, systematic abuses in the camps. And those are the reality for the Uyghur children. Even Han Chinese people don't wear those kind of clothes anymore. The Uyghur kids are, no matter if they are in the in the state-run orphanages, or even if they are home, they have to wear clothes like that. And they are being brainwashed every day. And they forsake their language and they forsake their ethnic identity and religion and just pledge themselves to Xi Jinping and to the Chinese Communist government. This is the saddest part of this genocide, actually. The Uyghur girls are forced to marry Han Chinese men, and the government is offering these men money, housing, and the jobs to marry Uyghur women. If she refuses such a forced marriage for whatever reasons, she's not ready to get married, or she doesn't want to marry this particular person, she, her siblings, and her parents will send to the concentration camps in the name of Islamic extremists. Radicalized Muslims did not want to marry non-Muslim Han Chinese. So when the Chinese government claims of all these people are there because of the terrorism, or they are radicalized, they are Islamic extremists, or this is national security issue, those are the kind of people they are talking about. People who pray, people who refuse to eat pork, or refuse to drink alcohol, or refuse to marry Han Chinese. Chinese state media reported that 1.1 million Han Chinese cadres, mostly male, deployed into Uyghur homes, live inside of their houses, and supervise and monitor their daily lives. Uyghur women are subject to sexual abuse inside their own homes. Most men are sent to forced labor facilities or prisons or concentration camps. The Uyghur women left at home are subject to sexual abuse. I'm going to play this video, and you see one person is taping the video, 3 Han Chinese men on the bed, 1 woman on the side with a baby in her arm. So what happens when this man puts down the camera? She is going to be sexually abused by 4 Han Chinese men. This is the reality of the Uyghur people today. After forced sterilization of the Uyghur women and the forced abortions and the forced marriages, Uyghur population dropped more than 50% in the last few years. And then the Chinese embassy in the United States publicly congratulated themselves to their efforts by tweeting this. And after we reported, after the journalists picked up, they deleted the tweet, but the Uyghur women are being called that they are no longer baby-making machines. I have been trying to get some sort of attention to the Uyghur women's atrocities, Uyghur children's, the abuses that they are facing from the international community, from the feminists, from the activists, from the celebrities. All these people who are usually so vocal against any kind of social injustice, rightfully, they should. But where are they when something like this is happening? Why they are silent? I don't see talk show hosts talking about this. I don't see Hollywood celebrities talking about this subject. I don't see the so-called world-renowned feminists talking about this. You know who represents women and the girls' rights in United Nations? Special envoy in United Nations for women and the girls' rights? Peng Liyuan, Xi Jinping's wife, the Chinese dictator who is personally responsible for all this, and his wife represents all women and girls in the United Nations. Those pictures are not from some horror movies from the World War II. These are the Uyghur detainees being transported to the China proper. If you see the one in the middle, they are all these shaved head, blindfolded, shackled men are hauled away to the train. As you see the picture on the middle, on the right-hand side, there is a train. For 2 weeks in East Turkestan, they stopped the public transportation, the trains and the buses for the general public, and they transported Uyghur prisoners to China proper. When these people were arrested to the detention centers, they were not charged with any crimes. None of them committed any crimes. Their only crime was being Uyghur. But after they were taken to the camps, and then they sent 2 other prisoners in Heilongjiang, Shandong, and other provinces as criminals. So that's actually the part of that. 13 tons of human hair. Imagine how many people does that represent? 13 tons of human hair made it over to the United States. The Customs and Border Patrol. And if you read that article at the bottom, it said it's originated in Xinjiang. The Uyghur people's here. So I often wonder if my sisters here also made it over. Special lane in Kashgar, which is mostly Uyghur populated city. In the Kashgar airport, a special lane was dedicated for people who are transporting human organs. As I mentioned earlier, the government has everyone's health records, so it's easy to just collect their organs. And then we heard actually they are sending the human, they are sending the young people, young Uyghurs, as a person and sent them to other parts, Beijing, Shanghai, or other Middle Eastern countries to collect their organs. May 2022, we had another leak. The Xinjiang police files. The first time we had images of those people in the camps. The girl at the top is 15 years old, and the old grandma at the bottom is 76 years old. And these are the examples of the innocent people in the camps. If you look at these kids, 15, 16, most of them are younger than you. And their crimes is, some of them are lists as she or he followed his grandma or grandpa 5 years ago and went to the mosque and prayed. While the Chinese government claims was showing propaganda videos of Uyghurs jumping up and down, dancing and singing, and said they are really happy in the camps and they are voluntarily being there. This is the reality. And those armed guards are given order of shoot first, then report order. So they can just shoot and kill anybody if they feel like, and then report later. Finally, After waiting and waiting, after calling Michelle Bachelet's resignation, after constantly going to Geneva for meetings, for protests, we did have the human rights report within last 15 minutes of Michelle Bachelet's expiration of her term as High Commissioner. It confirmed that everything we have been saying for years: mass detention, torture, sexual violence, mass surveillance, forced labor, sterilization of the Uyghur women, family separation, children abduction, all this, if you look at it, it matches all the elements of Geneva Convention's own description of the crimes of genocide. There's 5 elements, and it says if one is happening, you can call it genocide. We have at least 4. Yet, it was determined the crimes against humanity may constitute crimes against humanity. Still, this is a report came out of the table that China sits on. China is on the Human Rights Council. So, more than a year now. What happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing has happened to help the Uyghur people back home, help the activists or their family members in diaspora, nothing. And that's my sister. Today, I am speaking to you at the cost of her freedom. And she's still in jail. She's a retired medical doctor. She was never politically active. She was just living ordinary life. She retired early age due to health reasons. For 5 years, I have no proof of life, no information on her health. She is still in jail, in dark dungeon somewhere. Who knows what kind of shirt she's making as a forced laborer, or what kind of torture that she's subject to. I have no idea. The Chinese provincial officials reported that the Uyghurs free, they graduated, they're all free now. Well, if our family members did not come home, my husband's entire family is still missing. All the Uyghurs in diaspora still looking for their family members. Where did they go? Where did they graduate to? They graduated to the factories as slaves. Chinese government talks about unemployment problem in Xinjiang must be resolved. That's why they are sending the Uyghurs to all other China the province of China, while they are bringing millions of Han Chinese to East Turkestan, offering them jobs, housing, and the healthcare and the money. Australian Strategic Policy Institute, SP, did a report. Name of the report is Uyghurs for Sale. Literally, Uyghurs are being sold. Bonuses are being offered. If you buy 2,000 Uyghur laborers, we give you 10 policemen for free to guard them. The Uyghur forced labor is basically tainting the most industries, 20 global industries in the world, and more than 100 Western brands that we all know and we all use are using Uyghur slaves for their supply chains. 1 out of every 5 cotton garments made by cotton picked by Uyghur slaves. Most of the major auto, toy, beauty supplies, and the other industries are tainted. And the solar industries, we are talking about clean energy. Clean energy is not clean from slavery. The Uyghur slaves making those solar panels. Those are a list of the few companies using Uyghur slaves. and making profit out of this genocide, making this genocide a profitable venture for the Chinese Communist regime. You recognize most of the names probably, and you use probably most of them. It shows some of the labor transfers from East Turkestan to China proper from 2017 till 2020, which are the peak of the detention. 3 to 5 million Uyghurs were detained in the concentration camps. If you ever purchased any vehicle in the last 5 years, some part of your car is built by the Uyghurs' slave labor, because Chinese government deliberately made that any of these brands, either your tire or your upholstery, the fabrics or glass or something in your car is made by Uyghur forced labor. Climate change, that's a huge thing. We all support that. But 80% of global manufacturing of the solar panel, solar supplies are made by the Uyghurs. That China controls those 80%, and that those are all made by the Uyghur slaves. So we need to ensure the clean energy is actually clean. And that's what you can do as young students. You need to educate yourself on this. There are plenty of information out there, and educate people around you and talk about this, speak about this, and share the information that you see on the social media, and contact your lawmakers and pressure them to do something about it. Another part of Chinese government's manipulation of the academic world is the Confucius Institutes. Actually, the Confucius family was trashed and attacked by this Chinese communist regime. Even their like a barrier site was completely destroyed during the Cultural Revolution. Yet, they see this name in the West, and they're using the way of like teaching Chinese culture or Chinese language. And they went into every university, and with that, they are manipulating and controlling the freedom at the universities, and as well as influencing the Chinese political ideas and the communist ideologies. I went to Columbia University to give a presentation. This was right before pandemic in 2020. And when I arrived there, find out it was a panel, supposed to be a panel with myself, a Hong Kong activist, a Tibetan activist, and another Chinese dissident. 4 of us supposed to speak. When we got there, we realized our panel was canceled because students and the Confucius Institute from the university, they complained. They didn't want our panel. They didn't want us to come and speak, and they exposed the truth. I felt like I was in Beijing. I was in China. This is one of the immediate call to action. If you click on the QR code, you will have a place that you enter your name to support this. This is a Uyghur Forced Labor Disclosure Act, because we do have the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act that we worked so hard to pass, but implementation is facing problem. There are hundreds of entities still complicit with using the Chinese, using the Uyghur forced labor, but Congress is pushing to get 28 entities to sanction those 28 entities recently, and it's not happening. So because of the loopholes, because of their many different things that we didn't really address on the original Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, we need this one, the Uyghur Forced Labor Disclosure Act. So it's very crucial for us to have this pass in the Congress, both Senate and the House. So we need your help. Follow us on social media and amplify our voice. This is at least what you can do. Share the information, share what you see, and go to our website, campaignforuyghurs.org, and sign up for our mailing list. We don't send out a lot of mass emails, but once in a while, like 1 or twice a week, we send out updates on the press releases, so you keep yourself informed of what's happening. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm open to your questions now.
All right, who has a question for Mrs. Abbas?
Yes.
We'll bring you the.
Okay.
So one of the things that usually gets brought up when talking about the Uyghur genocide is like, oh, well, what can we do? Or like, what can we do to like force China to stop doing that? And like, I never have an answer for that. And so I'd be interested to hear from you on what we can do, both as a country and individuals.
Yes. Thank you so much. As an individual, what you can do is you can go to our website. There's a tab called Call to Action, and you can sign up for volunteering or do whatever you can. But there's more than that. What everybody can do, what United States or the Americans can do or the world community can do is do it not so much for the sake of the Uyghurs anymore. Do it to protect your own freedom and democracy, your free speech. Speak out, because the Chinese government doesn't want you to speak out. Whenever and wherever when people speak, they say, oh, it's Asia hate, it's hurting the Chinese 1.8 billion Chinese people's feelings, and whatever, to silence you. If they try to silence us by taking our family members, every single Uyghurs in diaspora, every single Uyghur person have their family members back home as hostages. The Chinese government is using these family members to silence those Uyghurs, but you don't face that. Why people are not speaking? As I mentioned earlier, why those CEO of the major corporate America or those famous talk show hosts or NBA celebrities or anybody who usually speak out against any kind of unjust or anything that they believe, why they don't speak out against the CCP? What does that mean? If the Chinese government scares them because they are afraid of their profit margins, or if they are afraid of their movie is not going to get the popularity in China, or anything, if they are afraid of speaking out today, what's going to happen 20 years from now? If we don't speak out, if we don't do something now and hold the Chinese communist regime accountable and defend our freedom, then the only voice left to speak will be one of regret, and it will be too late. We need to wake up, because this is not just happening within China's borders. It's everywhere. It's coming here, controlling the politicians, even the administration. We are not happy with many things that's happening right now. We need to speak out. If we don't hold our politicians accountable, if we don't hold our government accountable, so they can hold the regime accountable for their crimes, then the Uyghurs today will be the future for the entire world, because that's what the Chinese government wants. They are using East Turkestan as a testing ground, and they're testing the water, testing the international community's will, how much that they can do and get away with. They're getting away. If they continuously get away with this, what's going to happen? Let's just look at what happened 75 years ago with Nazi Germany. established Holocaust and concentration camps in 1933 until 1945, 12 years. The West, the world community continuously doing business as usual with Nazi Germany, empowering their economy to murder more people. Well, they all came and regretted and said they didn't know it because information flow was too slow. Also, they knew, but they claimed the ignorance and said they didn't know it. But today, this is information era. Nobody can claim the ignorance. No one has that excuse. The genocide, that's an active genocide, what's happening today, needs people to take sides. There's no neutrality for genocide. You either want to be on the right side of the history or you side with genocide, and you go down to the history books as you cited. There is a vow never again after the World War II. And everything that you saw here, and it's not just that I'm talking as an Uyghur activist. The time after time, Chinese government owned leaked data, so many of them, there's like 5, 6 of them, stating their policies that they are eradicating the Uyghur people. What are we waiting for? What more do we want? So we need to speak out to protect our freedom and democracy. I'm sorry I'm answering very long because there's so many things that I want to address here. I left my homeland when I was about your age. I was 21 in 1989. I did not speak a word of English. My father was worried for my safety because of my involvement in the human rights and advocacy work. So he sent me off to the United States. I left my family, I left my friends, I left my parents because I was looking for something that I did not have back home, which is the freedom and democracy. And we are losing that here. This is not the United States that I knew 34 years ago when I first came over. We are losing. If we don't wake up now, it will be your children and the grandchildren will pay the consequence of an illiberal world, which we lived there. We know how it is. And believe me, it's not nice. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah. So realistically speaking, the international community does recognize the atrocities committed to the Uyghurs as evidenced by your UN report from 2022. There has been no effort done on the part of the UN committee. There has been no effort done by America or the European Union. How do you suggest that America or the European Union or the world react to China, considering China's economic clout and influence across the world? They seem predestined to be a major power, and without serious conflict, I don't see how the United States could realistically challenge China's involvement with the Uyghurs. So how do you propose the United States and the UN take the fight to China and force them to stop committing genocide?
When the Chinese government started implementing the genocidal policies in 2014 and eventually did the active one in 2017 by detaining millions of people, they took care of 2 major international entities. One is UN, and one is OIC, the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. In the UN, they put Secretary Guterres and Michelle Bachelet. Secretary Guterres as the General Secretary, and Michelle Bachelet was holding the Human Rights Council. She was a representative or the main spokesperson for China's Belt and Road Initiative in Chile and in South Latin America. So what she did was, the entire time that she was sitting in the Human Rights Council, she did not criticize China, not even once, while she criticized the United States more than 80 times, and speaking the human rights abuses in the United States. Yes, we have mistakes, and we are not perfect government here, but that's the beauty of the democracy, that you can speak about your own government. Secretary Guterres, same thing. He has not mentioned, not even once, about the Uyghur genocide or even these Uyghur people criticizing China. So to me, the United Nations is sort of like lost cause, unless if we have United States go strongly and the other member states, European Union speaks out there, which we are lobbying. We are going around the world and talking to other countries. Right now, there is General Assembly, 78th UN General Assembly is happening in New York. I came here yesterday from New York after attending a couple side events and meeting with some people. So we cannot give up. We cannot lose hope, because that's the only thing we have left, the hope that leads us to fight onwards. So we have to keep hoping that we will make a difference in UN, but in the European Union itself, Germany, France, and some other countries, and UK, Canada, Australia, United States, recognizing China being a national threat. They are seeing the danger the Chinese Communist government is going to bring in, but we just need to pull that plug, power line. We cannot continue to feed the monster by continuing to do the business as usual. We are pulling little by little. There are some things are happening, and I hope that we will continuously work with our lawmakers. That's why it's so critical for you to be vocal and contact your lawmakers. The politicians only work with pressure. We need to pressure them. We need to ask them to speak out, do something, and then make differences. So we all, as individuals, we just need to do our part first, and then we can demand our government and the international communities to do something. Thank you.
Any other questions? Excuse me.
So I heard about that there's, I don't think it's quite to the extent that's going on with the Uyghurs, but I know that with the Tibetan people, there's a lot of effort being put on by the Chinese to try to push them out of society and make the Tibetans not part of the community there anymore. Are you working with any activists from Tibet or that are based here in the United States to try to work together to achieve a common goal?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We do work with all marginalized groups, all the ethnic groups, Tibetans, Southern Mongolians, and the Hong Kongers. We do have a coalition. We have a coalition with more than 200 organizations, the End Uyghur Forced Labor Coalition. There's a website, enduyghurforcedlabor.org. So we do work with everyone who are being subject to the Chinese Communist regime's persecution.
Hi. You talked in your presentation a bit about the bill that is in the process of being passed, hopefully. And I just wanted to ask if there were any other bills or policies that you and your organization were supporting to try and get even more attention or action taken on this.
Yeah. There's another one actually pretty critical that's addressing the Uyghur refugees in the United States. We are not huge population here. I think we are only like 8,000 to 10,000 Uyghurs, but a couple thousand Uyghurs who came in who couldn't go back to their home after they studied here last 5, 6 years because of the genocide. They're all on the dilemma. they apply for political asylum, but they are waiting for the immigration to have the interviews, and they don't have status, so they cannot really continue their lives. So we asked the Congress to pass a special legislation to give them a P2 status, refugee status. Like we brought many refugees from Ukraine or from Afghanistan or other parts. I mean, Ukraine is more toward the Europe, but many refugees came here in a special status. So we would like Congress to pass special status for the Uyghur people, because it seems like there's not much we can do for people back home because of the complete control. But at least we can do something for the Uyghurs who are living in the United States. Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question.
Any
Okay,
other
cool.
questions?
We got one, perfect.
Hi, sorry. I was just wondering, I read some articles that said that the Biden administration was putting some of the companies that did business in these concentration camps on the entity list so that US businesses can't work with them. I was wondering if any of the sanctions from the federal government have changed China's policies with respect to the concentration camps, and if you believe that more sanctions would affect or impact the policies.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question, actually. Luckily, we have support from both parties, Republicans and the Democrats. And during the last administration, we had the determination of the genocide, and then this administration concorded. And also, they sanctioned many entities, including XPCC, which has thousands of subsidiaries, XPCCs, being planned in Chinese, Xinjiang Production Construction Group, which is paramilitary owned by the Chinese government, and they are using the Uyghurs as slaves and everywhere for the last 70-some years. So, and this administration too, adding some other companies on the sanction list, but it's not enough. When we have hundreds of companies, we need to do more than just a few here and a few there. And we do have support from both in the Congress and the Republicans and Democrats, both supporting any kind of sanctions. So hopefully that's going to move forward. But the one thing that it bothers me is, as young people, you should understand is TikTok, ByteDance, the parent company for TikTok. TikTok is a spy app. TikTok is actually, it endangers your own safety, privacy. At the same time, the Chinese government uses that to monitor your activities. And they are using TikTok to whitewash the genocide, producing all kinds of propaganda videos of Uyghurs dancing and singing and saying there's no genocide. So yet we are having a problem, we are having an issue getting ByteDance added to the sanction list, because many young people use that, and some politicians are afraid that they are going to lose the vote from the young generation. So that shouldn't be in question. And I want to end, I think that's the last question, I just want to end with reminding you all, Putin's invasion came in the bright daylight with tanks and armed soldiers, and they just coming in. And that should remind everyone what happens when you continue to appease a dictator and the dictatorship government. But China's invasion is not like Russia's or anyone else's. China's invasion come in with smiley faces, suitcases of money, and claiming that it's win-win for everyone. We all know that at the end of any game, there's one winner and one loser. The Chinese government always is going to be the winner on their plans. They make plans for 100 years, 50 years, 20 years, 5 years, and they stick to that. They have their 100 years plan. The end of 2049, they want to take over the world. When I was a young student like you guys, when I sit in the rooms like this, listening to the Chinese political officials coming over and they give us political study sessions, they used to openly say, last century was a century of humiliation for the Chinese people. The world calling them sickness of the Asia, and the, taking the Chinese people, bring them to the United States to build their railroads, or taking over Hong Kong and the Opium War and all these things. And they say this century is our century of retaliation. And this is what they used to talk about back in the mid and late 80s when I was a student. That's the goal they have, and that's the vision they have, and that's how they are moving toward. So for you, yes, please do something for the Uyghur people. I would like you to do something for the Uyghur people. But more than that, do it for the future of this great country we all love. Do it for the freedom and democracy. Please act. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for